It started with a growl, not a vicious one, nothing sharp or angry, just a deep, steady rumble from the throat of a German shepherd named Scout. It rolled through the NICU like distant thunder. Nurse Linda Parker looked up from the chart in her hand. Scout was standing motionless, his dark eyes locked on the incubator in the far left corner. Baby monitors blinked, oxygen lines hummed, and the gentle beeps of life support filled the room. But all Linda could hear was that growl. "Scout," she said cautiously, rising to her feet. "What is it, boy?" The 7-year-old shepherd didn't flinch, didn't move, didn't blink. He was fixated like something in that clear plastic box had set off an alarm only he could hear. 3 nurses tried to lure him away with gentle tugs on his blue vest. A security guard stepped in offering treats, but Scout planted his paws and refused to budge. He let out a sudden sharp bark so loud and unexpected, it startled a tech into dropping a tray of syringes. That was the moment. That was when everything changed. And none of them, not Linda, not Dr. Blake, not the exhausted parents watching from behind the glass, knew the truth yet. Scout wasn't just protecting a baby. He was guarding a secret. Northwestern Memorial Hospital sat like a modern glass fortress in downtown Chicago, catching the October sunlight in sharp angles. Inside the 4th-floor neonatal intensive care unit was a world apart, quiet, sterile, and cradling life that had barely begun. 6 pounds, 4 pounds. Some babies came in weighing less than a bag of sugar, wired up to more machines than a fighter jet. That's where Scout worked. He wasn't just a therapy dog. He had been trained for something few people truly understood: scent-based medical detection. He could pick up on shifts in breath chemistry, on changes in metabolic output, on tiny signals a machine might miss. And for years, he'd done it beside his person, Dr. Claire Monroe, a neonatal nurse and trailblazer in the field. She and Scout had been a unit. Claire with her practical ponytail and dry wit, Scout with the scar over one ear from the shelter where Claire had first found him as a terrified puppy. They'd made a difference. Until 6 weeks ago. Until that rainy Tuesday night when a delivery truck ran a red light on Michigan Avenue. Claire never even had time to break. They'd held the memorial in the hospital chapel. A closed casket funeral. White roses. Scout had lain in the hallway outside the service, his head resting on Claire's lab coat, refusing to eat for days afterward. Everyone said he was grieving. But Linda had seen something deeper. A working dog without a job. A partner without a mission. She was the one who brought him back. She fought for it, meetings, appeals, pushback from hospital brass. But finally, Dr. Evelyn Grant, the hospital director, relented. 3 days, she had said sharply. He stays in the staff area unless supervised. If he causes trouble, he's out. No exceptions. Scout walked back into the NICU for the first time as a visitor, not as Claire's partner. And everything shifted. His tail lifted. His stride lengthened. Scout didn't sniff for crumbs or look for pets. He made a loop around the incubators just like Claire had taught him, pausing here and there, sitting by 2 babies briefly before moving on. Then he reached the far left station. Baby Noah Carter, born 5 weeks premature, just over 4 pounds, skin the color of porcelain. But otherwise healthy, the doctors had said. Scout stopped. He didn't sniff. He didn't move. He simply stared at the infant inside. Eyes wide, body tense, nose twitching like radar. And then that growl again. Rachel Carter had been sitting nearby, curled in a blanket notebook in her lap. She was young, 28 maybe, and looked like she hadn't slept in a month. Her husband Mike paced by the coffee station in the parent lounge, eyes darting toward the NICU window. They were first-time parents, scared, sleep-deprived, but full of love. When Rachel noticed the dog, she stood slowly. "Is he okay?" she asked Linda, hesitant. "Why is he staring like that?" Linda gave a practiced smile. "He's a medical alert dog, highly trained. He's just taking an interest, that's all." But even as she said it, her voice faltered. Because Scout wasn't just taking an interest. He was warning them. Before we continue, if you're moved by animal hero stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel on Heroes for Animals. Every view supports true stories of courage, compassion, and the animals that change our lives forever. Dr. Adam Blake, the NICU specialist on rotation, walked in moments later, his wireframe glasses fogged from the temperature shift. "Linda," he asked, scanning the room, "why is our 4-legged friend blocking that station like it's a crime scene?" Linda frowned. "He's been like that for 20 minutes. Blake checked Noah's monitors. Everything looked fine: heart rate, blood oxygen, no warning bells. Scout let out a sharp bark, then another. Blake paused. Okay, let's run a manual blood gas panel, just to be safe. Doc, the machines say he's fine, a nurse chimed in. Blake nodded slowly. Sure, but I've seen this dog flag a metabolic imbalance 2 days before it ever hit the chart. Mike Carter had walked over now, standing beside Scout. He crouched, looking into the dog's eyes. And something strange happened. A flicker of recognition, a jolt in the chest, like déjà vu, or destiny, or both. He didn't know the dog, had never met Dr. Claire Monroe, but something about Scout's posture, his stillness, his focus stirred an ache in Mike's gut he couldn't explain. Hey, buddy, he whispered. What are you seeing that we're not? Scout shifted. For just a second, his eyes met Mike's, and Mike flinched. Because those eyes, they weren't just alert. They were familiar. Nurse Linda was flipping through Scout's behavioral training log later that night when the blood results came back. Slight metabolic irregularities. Nothing serious yet. But left untreated, it could have become catastrophic. Dr. Blake immediately adjusted the baby's treatment plan. Minor tweaks, a small supplement, extra oxygen overnight. Nothing dramatic, but it made all the difference. And Scout didn't move from that incubator for the next 8 hours. He lay down next to it alert, but calm, eyes fixed on the tiny life inside, refusing to budge, refusing to let go. And what nobody in that NICU could possibly know, what even Mike and Rachel couldn't imagine, was that this dog wasn't there by coincidence. He had come back for a reason, to protect this child, to fulfill a promise, to finish what Claire had started. The next morning, Scout was already waiting by the NICU door when Nurse Linda arrived for her 6 a.m. shift. He didn't whine, didn't pace, just sat there, his leash coiled neatly on the floor beside him, ears perked, eyes locked on the glass, like a sentry waiting for the world to wake up. Linda had barely stepped through the double doors when Scout rose and nudged her hand with his nose, then trotted down the hallway toward baby Noah's station. Okay, she whispered, heart pinching in her chest. We're doing this again, huh? The overnight nurse had left a note on the chart. Dog remained alert, occasionally paced, no signs of stress. Baby stable, but Linda knew better. This wasn't routine. This was a mission. Scout moved with purpose, stopping briefly at one incubator to sniff, tilting his head toward another, but always circling back to Noah. The way he paused, sat, stared. It wasn't random. It was focused, almost emotional. Mike Carter returned an hour later holding a coffee that had long gone cold in his hand. He looked like he hadn't slept. His wife, Rachel, was already inside reading softly to baby Noah through the plastic port window of the incubator. The same book she'd been reading yesterday, Goodnight Moon, her voice low and rhythmic. When Scout saw Mike, he stood and wagged his tail gently, then returned to his usual position beside Noah's bed. I don't get it, Mike said softly, crouching beside the dog. He's not even our dog, and I feel like he knows us better than anyone else here. Rachel glanced over. He's like a guardian angel in a fur coat. Linda offered a tired smile. You'd be surprised how accurate that is. Dr. Adam Blake came in for rounds wearing scrubs with a pattern of tiny rockets, his Thursday pair. His daughter had picked them out for him when she was 5. He stopped when he saw Scout already parked at Noah's station. Still on duty, he asked. Linda nodded. Didn't move much during the night. Monitors stayed clean. But Scout's not convinced. Dr. Blake checked the chart. Noah's blood gas results from yesterday had normalized. Heart rate strong. Oxygen saturation 98%. By all clinical accounts, the baby was doing great. But Scout still hadn't left. Dr. Blake crouched beside the dog. What are we missing, bud? Scout looked up at him, ears twitching, then placed one paw against the base of the incubator. The same move Claire had trained him to do during her scent drills. Linda saw it too and swallowed hard. That's his alert. Yeah, Blake murmured, nodding. I know. Back in her office, Dr. Evelyn Grant was reviewing the overnight logs. She'd been skeptical, more than skeptical, if she was honest about allowing a dog back into the NICU. Especially this one. Especially after Claire. Claire Monroe had been brilliant, no doubt. A rising star in neonatal care. But she had been unconventional. Always pushing protocols. Always challenging procedure. Dr. Grant had butted heads with her more than once. But now, the chart in front of her told a different story. Scout had flagged a metabolic imbalance before it showed up in the labs. That wasn't just impressive, that was historic and disturbing, because it meant there were things the machines still couldn't see. By mid-morning, the story had started to spread through the hospital. A retired service dog, refusing to leave a baby's side. A nurse who died 6 weeks earlier. A baby born 5 weeks too soon. It had all the elements of urban legend, and yet it was unfolding in real time. Nurses from other departments began dropping by the NICU. A respiratory tech brought Scout a peanut butter treat. A pediatrician came to observe rounds and stayed 20 minutes longer than he had to. But Scout ignored all of them. His job wasn't finished. Linda found herself staring at baby Noah that afternoon, watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest. Something about his breathing pattern, it wasn't wrong, but it wasn't quite right either. Subtle pauses, barely noticeable breaks in rhythm. If Scout hadn't been so insistent, she might have chalked it up to routine preemie behavior. But now she wasn't so sure. Mike, she said, quietly approaching Noah's parents. Can I ask you something a little personal? Mike looked up from his phone. Yeah, sure. Do you have any family history of metabolic disorders? He frowned. My sister had something. I don't remember the name. She had to be on a special diet. Our parents were always real strict about it. Rachel tilted her head. You never told me that. He shrugged. We haven't talked in over 15 years. Long story. It just never came up. Linda's expression darkened slightly. What was your sister's name? He hesitated. Claire. Claire Monroe. But that's not her last name anymore. She kept our mom's maiden name. Rachel blinked. Linda's mouth opened slightly, then closed again. Claire Monroe, as in Dr. Claire Monroe. Mike nodded. You knew her. Linda sat down, her legs suddenly unsteady. Mike. Claire was Scout's handler. She worked here. She was our colleague, and she died 6 weeks ago. The silence was deafening. Rachel covered her mouth with her hand. Mike went pale. No, he whispered. That can't be. But it was. It hit him like a gut punch. The eyes, the dig, the feeling in the hallway. She'd been here all along. His sister, the one he had walked away from at 19 after an ugly fight. The one he hadn't spoken to in 16 years. The one who had begged him not to leave and whom he'd left anyway. She had been here, working in this hospital, caring for these babies, training this dog. And now Scout was glued to Noah like his life depended on it. Because maybe it did. Back in the staff lounge, Mike sat alone with Scout. He pulled out his phone and searched Claire Monroe, neonatal nurse, Chicago obituary. It was there, her picture smiling back at him. No immediate family listed. His chest tightened. Scout patted over and laid his head on Mike's knee. You knew, Mike whispered. You knew who I was. You knew who he was. The dog just stared. And Mike broke down. That evening, Dr. Blake returned with fresh lab results. There's something here, he said, his voice tight. We're seeing early signs of MCAD deficiency. It's rare, but it's serious if untreated. Rachel's breath caught. What does that mean? It means he said carefully that Scout picked it up before we could. Again. Dr. Grant arrived a few minutes later, lips tight but not unsympathetic. Start treatment, she said, immediately. And get me everything, Claire's research notes, Scout's training logs, all of it. That night, Scout refused to leave again. The team tried. Linda pulled on his leash. A tech offered treats. Security came in. Nothing worked. He growled softly, standing his ground beside Noah's bed. So they gave up. They laid a small dog bed beside the incubator and let him stay. Scout curled up, nose near the base of the machine, eyes never closing fully. Mike stayed too, sitting quietly beside the glass, one hand on Scout's back, the other resting on the warm plastic of the incubator. He wasn't ready to leave either, not until he knew Noah was safe. Not until he had a chance to say the words to his sister that he never got to say in life. I'm sorry, Scout barked once. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the NICU like a flare in a quiet sky. Dr. Adam Blake looked up from baby Noah's chart. Monitors were steady, vitals within range. The latest blood panel had confirmed the early signs of MCAD deficiency, nothing life-threatening if caught early. But Scout wasn't acting like this was under control. Not anymore? Okay, Dr. Blake said, straightening up. What now, boy? The German Shepherd stood suddenly stiff-legged and focused. His tail didn't wag, his ears didn't twitch. He marched past the incubator and across the floor straight to the emergency medication cart near the sink. And stopped, then barked again. One bark, sharp, deliberate. Dr. Blake blinked. He's never done that before. Nurse Linda stepped closer. Wait a minute. Claire used to run drills using medicine drawers. Scent markers. She taught him to recognize treatments based on scent associations. Scout lifted a paw and tapped the bottom drawer, deliberately, once, twice, then sat, still, alert, watching. And that's when the pieces began to fall into place. Rachel Carter was pacing again, cradling her phone in one hand and the edge of her sweater in the other. Noah had been stable since they'd started the glucose and oxygen adjustments. But every hour, Scout flagged something new, something not on the monitors. Now he was alerting to medication. "What's going on?" she asked, voice tight. "Why is he doing that?" Mike moved closer, his voice low. "It's like he's trying to talk. I mean, look at him. He's not just reacting, he's trying to tell us something specific." Linda opened the drawer Scout had tapped. Inside, she found a box of carnitine supplements used only in rare metabolic conditions when patients have difficulty converting fats into usable energy. Dr. Blake stared at the box. That shouldn't be relevant yet, but he turned sharply to the nearest tech. "Page Dr. Grant, and someone pull Claire Monroe's complete medical file." 15 minutes later, Evelyn Grant stood at the nurse's station with a tablet in one hand and her pearl necklace twisted between her fingers, a habit that only surfaced when she was deep in thought. Claire Monroe was diagnosed with MCAD combined with carnitine transport deficiency, age 11, she said, reading from the screen. A dual diagnosis, extremely rare. She managed it with strict dietary control and supplements. Blake exhaled slowly. "That explains the alert." Linda added softly, "And Scout's behavior? He's not just reacting to MKD. He's detecting the exact combination Claire had." Mike froze, but that means Noah has it too. "We don't know that yet," Dr. Grant said cautiously. "But given Scout's history and Claire's training methods, and the genetics," Dr. Blake interrupted, "Mike is Claire's brother. It tracks." Scout stood and moved to the incubator again. He whined loud, persistent pacing in a circle, then sat with a thump tail curled tight. Everyone stared. "He's begging us," Linda said softly, "to hurry." Noah's color had shifted just slightly, a bluish tinge around the lips. Barely visible, but not right. Dr. Blake didn't wait. "High-dose carnitine. Now, let's not waste time." The nurses moved quickly, drawing a new blood sample while the supplement was prepared. Scout watched every motion, head low, eyes darting between the staff and the incubator, like a general in battle. He didn't move, didn't blink, not until the IV was connected and the medication began to flow. Then he sighed and lay down, still watching, but calmer, like he knew the message had finally been heard. After the team stabilized, Noah and Mike stepped out into the hallway, leaning heavily against the wall. He could still hear the quiet hum of the NICU behind him. Scout's faint breathing, Rachel's voice speaking softly to their son, and his heart felt like it had been wrung out and hung to dry. Everything he thought he knew about his family was shifting. He pulled out his phone again, scrolling through photos of Claire's old apartment, the ones Linda had helped him find through the hospital's property manager. She kept journals, boxes of them, stacked in labeled bins carefully filed by year and subject. He texted Linda, "Do you still have the keys to Claire's place?" The reply came back instantly. "Yes. You want to go now?" The apartment was quiet, still, like time had stopped the night Claire left for that final shift. It smelled faintly of lavender and dust. On the kitchen table, a half-written note still sat beneath a coffee mug. Scout walked in like he belonged there. He sniffed the couch, the rug, then padded into the back room. Mike followed and stopped short. The walls were painted soft yellow. A mobile hung above a crib, still in its box, unopened. Framed pictures of woodland animals sat propped against the baseboards. A stack of tiny onesies folded neatly on a chair. Claire had been planning for a baby she would never meet. In the corner, Mike found the journals, dozens of them, some clinical, others personal. He picked one at random, bound in worn leather, and flipped it open. May 15th. Scout identified the metabolic shift before the blood panel again. His nose knows what the machines miss. This could save lives someday. My life too, I suppose. Mike turned the page. May 17th. Saw a Reynolds Pharmaceuticals billboard downtown. I wonder if Ryan Know Mike now is still working for them. I still can't believe he changed his name. Does he ever think about me? He sat down slowly, the journal trembling in his hands. She'd been trying to find him. All these years, even after everything. Back at the hospital, Rachel stayed beside Noah's incubator. Scout had returned to his post, lying on the mat with his head resting on his paws. The carnitine was working. Noah's oxygen levels were up, heart rate steady, skin tone improving. But Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that they were just beginning to understand what all this meant. She looked down at Scout. "You're not just a good boy," she whispered. "You're a miracle." Scout lifted his head slightly, then reached out and touched her knee with his paw, as if to say, "Not done yet." Later that night, Mike returned to the hospital with a cardboard box tucked under his arm. He carried it into the NICU like it was made of glass. Inside Claire's journals, a framed photo of her smiling with Scout and a small stuffed bear. Rachel looked up, eyes red from crying. "What's that?" Mike swallowed. "It's her, everything." They opened the box together. Scout sniffed the contents, then laid down beside it. One journal in particular had a sticky note marked "Important, Noah." Rachel opened it carefully. Inside, Claire had written about gestational surrogacy, anonymous donor, a woman from Idaho, all confidential. But then came a page marked October 3rd. "Baby is healthy, strong heartbeat, carrier doing well. I can't believe it's real. I'm going to be a mom." Rachel's hand shook. She looked up. "Mike, I think." Mike was already nodding. Noah's not just her nephew. They stared at each other, the truth unfolding between them like a flood. She was his mother. The hospital social worker confirmed it a few days later. Claire had planned everything. The paperwork, the surrogate match, the nursery. She'd even selected the name Noah after their grandfather. But she never lived long enough to meet her son. And Rachel unwittingly had carried him for her. An impossible coincidence. Or maybe something more. That morning, as Noah lay sleeping peacefully in his incubator, Scout lifted his head and looked from Rachel to Mike. He wagged his tail once, then stood, then gently, delicately placed his paw on the corner of the incubator base. A silent salute. To Claire, to Noah, to everything that had been lost, and everything still left to protect. Mike Carter sat in the dim light of the NICU, a journal open in his lap, Scout lying silently beside him like a shadow. The hum of the machines, the gentle rise and fall of baby Noah's chest inside the incubator, the quiet footsteps of nurses, they were all background noise to the storm unraveling in his heart. He had just learned the truth. His sister Claire Monroe hadn't just trained this remarkable dog. She had brought his son into the world, and she had died 6 weeks too early to ever hold him. The weight of that reality was staggering. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to slow the spin in his mind. 16 years of silence. One stubborn argument, a grudge he never thought to let go of. And now there was no more time. Except, Scout was still here. And Noah. Maybe that counted for something. By the time the morning shift changed over, word had quietly spread among the NICU staff. The retired K-9. He hadn't just saved a baby, he'd found his person's baby, he had returned for her son. Nurse Linda Parker stood near the break room counter watching the new day crew file in. Most of them already aware of the story. A few had tears in their eyes. One nurse whispered, "It's like she's still here watching." Linda didn't answer. She just nodded and passed around a photo she'd pulled from the archives. Claire Monroe mid-laugh holding a clipboard and kneeling beside Scout during a training session. The caption read, "The nose knows." It had been a joke then. Now it felt like prophecy. Dr. Adam Blake was back on rounds, and though his usual dinosaur print socks peeked out under his scrubs, his tone was serious. "Noah's readings have stabilized, but we're not out of the woods," he said as he reviewed the chart with Linda and Dr. Evelyn Grant. "He'll need a tightly managed regimen," he continued. "Daily supplements, controlled feeding, constant metabolic monitoring. If we miss anything, even a minor illness could trigger a crisis." Dr. Grant crossed her arms, nodding. "We'll coordinate home care and training, but we should also consider the broader implications of what just happened here." "You mean Scout?" Linda asked. "I mean Claire," Dr. Grant replied. "Her program worked. Her research had merit. And if we don't build on it, we're doing a disservice to every child like Noah." Later that afternoon, Mike and Rachel were moved to a private consultation room. Dr. Grant, Dr. Blake, and a hospital social worker joined them. Scout sat at Mike's feet, calm but alert. Rachel held Noah's blanket in her lap, her fingers gripping it like a lifeline. Claire's will included instructions for Scout. Dr. Grant began, her voice softer than usual. She requested that he go wherever he's needed most, where he'd feel useful. "Given what we've witnessed, we believe that place is with your family." Mike blinked. "You mean he can come home with us?" Dr. Blake smiled. "He's already there emotionally. The paperwork's a formality." Rachel covered her mouth. "Oh my God." The social worker slid a folder across the table. "We'll walk you through his care commands and medical needs. You'll also be assigned a handler to assist with the transition." Mike leaned down and ran his fingers behind Scout's ears. The dog tilted his head and rested it on Mike's thigh. As the hospital prepared for Noah's eventual discharge, preparations began to honor the legacy that had made his survival possible. Dr. Grant called a board meeting to announce the launch of a new initiative, the Claire Monroe Program for Neonatal Detection. Scout would serve as its founding member. Her journals filled with scent profiles, detection patterns, case notes, and personal reflections would be digitized and studied. Her methodology, once considered unorthodox, was now the blueprint for the future. Linda stood up and volunteered to oversee the archive review. She saw what we couldn't, she said to the room, and Scout, he was never just a dog to her. He was a partner, a protector, a bridge between science and instinct. That night, after Rachel finally fell asleep in the recliner beside Noah's crib, Mike stayed behind to finish reading one final journal. It was dated 4 months earlier. In it, Claire had written about the pregnancy. I can't believe this is real. After everything, I'm going to be a mom. I know the risks. I know the odds. But if anyone's going to fight for a child with this condition, it's going to be me. I won't let fear stop me from trying. Mike closed the book and exhaled. The grief burned in his chest like a slow fire. She was so damn brave, he whispered. Scout looked up, ears forward. She was always stronger than me, Mike added, even when we were kids. The dog sighed and laid his head back down. The next morning, Scout stood vigil at the NICU door while the discharge papers were signed. Nurses took turns stopping by to say goodbye, some kneeling to hug him, others slipping him a treat. Linda handed Mike a rolled-up folder. Feeding plan supplement, schedule emergency contacts. You're going to be great, okay? Mike nodded. Thank you for everything. Linda crouched beside Scout. Take care of them, you hear me? Scout licked her hand once, then turned and walked beside Rachel and Mike, his new family, out of the hospital and into the sunlight. They arrived home to balloons on the mailbox and a banner stretched across the porch. Welcome home, Noah. Inside, they had turned their guest room into a nursery. Yellow walls, woodland decals. The mobile from Claire's apartment now hung above the crib, spinning slowly in the afternoon breeze. Rachel placed Noah carefully in his crib and clipped the pulse ox monitor to his tiny toe. Scout laid down on the rug beside him and rested his head on the baseboard. Look at that, Rachel whispered. He knows exactly where he belongs. Mike pulled out a small framed photo of Claire and placed it on the dresser, angled toward the crib. She should be here, he said quietly. She is, Rachel replied, everywhere. That evening, with the house quiet and Noah finally asleep, Mike sat on the porch steps beside Scout. The sky was a deep purple, and the cicadas were humming in the trees. He sipped from a bottle of ginger ale and glanced down at the point by his feet. You really loved her, didn't you? Scout didn't move. I did too, Mike whispered. I was just too proud to say it. He looked out at the yard, voice catching. Thank you for finishing what she started. For staying. Scout turned his head and placed a single paw over Mike's foot. It was small, but it was everything. In the weeks that followed, Noah grew stronger. His feeding improved. The treatment held steady. Rachel and Mike learned the signs, memorized the numbers, and built their life around tiny victories, a steady heartbeat, a full bottle, a quiet night. And through it all, Scout stayed close. He made his rounds hourly, sniffing the crib, checking Noah's breath, sometimes alerting Rachel with a soft whine when something seemed off even before the monitor chirped. He had a job again. A purpose, a boy to protect. The hospital installed a new plaque in the NICU hallway, a photo of Claire smiling in her scrubs, Scout by her side. Underneath it read, in memory of Claire Monroe, RN, pioneer, mother, sister, hero, and to Scout the dog who never gave up. It started as a quiet beeping. Nothing dramatic, just a soft chime on Noah's oxygen monitor that dipped 1 point below normal. Rachel Carter was sitting cross-legged on the floor of the nursery folding tiny laundry. Scout immediately stood up, ears high, and walked over to the crib, pressing his nose against the side rail. Rachel stood quickly. Noah, she asked, crossing the room and checking the readout. It looked fine, nothing alarming. But Scout whined again and began pacing, tail stiff, body tense. Rachel grabbed her phone. Mike, it's Scout again. You need to come home. Within 15 minutes, Mike burst through the front door, unbuttoning his shirt with one hand and holding his work bag in the other. He ran upstairs 2 steps at a time. What is it? He asked out of breath. Rachel pointed. The monitor dipped just slightly and Scout hasn't stopped pacing. Mike leaned over the crib. Noah's little chest was rising steadily, but the rhythm was slightly irregular. Those same tiny pauses Scout had noticed in the hospital. Mike didn't hesitate. He picked up the phone and called the on-call pediatrician. At the hospital, Dr. Adam Blake was already prepping a room when the Carters arrived. Noah was alert but quiet, his usual color, just a touch off. Scout wouldn't leave his side. Again, vitals are stable for now, Dr. Blake said after his initial check, but I want to run another full panel. Metabolic screening, liver function, carnitine levels. Let's be thorough. Rachel nodded, clutching Noah's baby blanket to her chest like a shield. Thank God Scout noticed something again. Mike looked down at the dog. How does he keep doing this? Dr. Blake smiled faintly. Claire trained him with scent patterns so specific we barely have the science to catch up. But we will, because of her and because of him. While waiting for the labs, Mike and Rachel sat side by side in a family room just down the hall from the NICU. Scout rested at their feet, calm now, but still alert eyes always watching the door. Rachel stared into her lap. You know, I always thought adoption meant giving life. But this, it's so much more complicated. Mike reached over and took her hand. You gave Claire the one thing she never had a chance to hold. But I didn't even know who she was, Rachel whispered. If I would have told her thank you. I would have let her meet him. You didn't know, Mike said gently. Neither of us did. But she chose this. She chose us. He looked toward the NICU. She chose Noah. An hour later, Dr. Blake returned with the results. Scout was right again, he said, holding the tablet with the lab readouts. Noah's experiencing early signs of metabolic decompensation. His carnitine levels dropped, likely from a minor virus or dietary stress. Is he going to be okay? Rachel asked, eyes wide. We caught it early, Blake reassured them. We're starting an IV and monitoring him overnight. But this reinforces what we've already seen. The Scout detects these shifts before we do. Mike nodded. Claire knew this would happen. That's why she wrote everything down. Blake smiled. Her research is now being studied by a team at the University of Chicago, and we've already had inquiries from 2 other NICUs interested in starting a pilot program. Scout barked once, tail swaying slowly, as if to say it's about time. The next morning, as Noah slept peacefully under close watch, a small group gathered at Northwestern Memorial's hospital atrium. The new Claire Monroe Pediatric Detection Lab was officially opening. There were no speeches, just a small plaque, a few tears, a quiet moment of remembrance. Dr. Grant stood with Linda and Dr. Blake, watching from a distance as Rachel and Mike placed a single sunflower in a vase beneath Claire's portrait. Scout sat beside them wearing a fresh blue bandana embroidered with a silver paw print. This was his moment too. After the ceremony, Mike pulled aside Dr. Grant. I found something in one of Claire's old journals, he said, unfolding a weathered envelope. She left this. For me. The letter was dated 2 weeks before her death. Mike, if you're reading this, then somehow the universe brought you back into my life, even if I'm not here anymore. I never stopped hoping you'd come back. I didn't know how to reach you. Not really, but I thought about you every day. And if by some miracle you're holding Noah in your arms now, then I know I made the right choice. You were always the strong one. You just didn't know it yet. Tell him about me when he's old enough. Tell him I loved him before I ever met him. And take care of Scout. He'll take care of you, Claire. Mike folded the letter, eyes wet. I never got to say I was sorry, he said quietly. Dr. Grant put a hand on his shoulder. She knew. Life settled into a new rhythm over the next month. Mike returned to work part-time, logging in remotely between feedings and medical routines. Rachel kept a meticulous schedule, Noah's medication times, Scout's behavior logs, and updates from the home nurse who visited 3 times a week. And Scout, he took on his role like a seasoned professional. Every morning at 6:00 a.m., he'd nudge Rachel awake. Every 2 hours, he'd walk his circuit crib monitor scent check. Every evening, he'd curl at Mike's feet in the living room while Noah dozed in a rocker. He never missed a sign. Not once. One Sunday afternoon, Rachel sat on the back porch with her mother, who had come down from Minnesota for a visit. They watched Mike toss a soft rubber ball to Scout while Noah napped inside. You look tired, her mom said gently. Rachel chuckled. I look how I feel. But you also look like a mother. Rachel smiled. I am one in every way that counts. Her mom reached over and squeezed her hand. You've done something beautiful, Rachel. Don't ever doubt that. Scout trotted back with the ball tail wagging and dropped it in Mike's hand. The sun dipped lower behind the trees. Everything finally felt still. That night, after they put Noah to sleep, Rachel joined Mike in the living room. A stack of Claire's journals sat between them. Mike picked up a pen. What are you doing? Rachel asked. I want to finish what she started, he said. Document everything. Scout's alerts, Noah's responses, the home routines, the training possibilities. Rachel leaned in. You think we could help other families? Mike nodded. I think we already are. He opened the journal to a fresh page and wrote, Day 1. Home monitoring with Scout, 10:14 a.m. Scout alerts to minor breath irregularity. Monitors confirm O2 level dip. Administered supplement, outcome positive. Rachel smiled. She would be proud of you. Mike didn't answer right away. He just smiled gently, resting his hand on Scout's back. Yeah, he finally said. I think she would. The first snowfall came early that year. Soft flurries drifted across the front lawn, As Scout sat on the porch, ears perked, eyes fixed on the baby monitor beside him. Inside through the nursery window, he could see Noah asleep in his crib, a soft blue knit cap covering his tiny head. It had been 3 months since they'd brought Noah home. 3 months of medication schedules, sleepless nights, therapy visits, pediatric checkups, and Scout. Always Scout. He never strayed more than a few feet from the baby, never missed a feeding alarm, never once failed to alert to the smallest sign of trouble. To Mike and Rachel Carter, Scout wasn't just a dog anymore. He was family, protector, healer, messenger of a love that hadn't ended, just changed form. That morning, Rachel poured coffee into her favorite Mom Fuel mug and leaned against the kitchen counter watching the snow gather on the windowsill. Mike entered with a yawn and a tablet under his arm. "Anything overnight?" he asked. Rachel shook her head, smiling. "Scout did his 3 a.m. sweep, gave me the all clear with a paw tap." Mike grinned. "I swear he's more accurate than our pediatrician." They both chuckled, then turned serious. "Have you thought any more about the proposal?" Mike asked. Rachel nodded. "The university wants to launch the pilot program with Scout as the model. They're calling it Claire's Code." She'd love that. Rachel looked out toward the nursery. He saved Noah so many times. We owe it to her to share what she built. Mike set the tablet down. "We should do it. For her. For every NICU that needs another pair of eyes or a nose." Later that week, they returned to Northwestern Memorial for a check-in and a press event tied to the launch of the Claire Monroe Detection Initiative. Noah, now 10 pounds heavier and full of coos and giggles, stole every heart in the building. But it was Scout who drew the biggest crowd. Children lined up just to pet him. Nurses brought framed photos. One doctor placed a collar tag with the word hero engraved on it around his neck. The atrium buzzed with pride and purpose. Dr. Evelyn Grant stood at the podium, silver hair flawless as ever, and addressed the gathered staff and media. "We talk about breakthroughs like they're lightning bolts," she said, "but sometimes they're quiet. Sometimes they come wrapped in fur, carrying in journals instead of patents." Claire Monroe saw a possibility none of us dared to explore. Scout made us believe. And Noah reminded us that even the smallest life can change the world. The crowd applauded. Mike held Noah close. Rachel wiped her eyes. Scout stood still, stoic and humble eyes scanning the crowd, not for praise, but for purpose. The next day was quiet again. Rachel and Mike took Noah to the park for the first time. Just a simple stroll, blankets, warm hats, a thermos of cocoa, and Scout trotting proudly beside the stroller. They reached a quiet spot near the pond. Rachel spread out a blanket, and they all sat for a while, just breathing in the moment. "This is what she wanted," Rachel whispered. Mike nodded. "For him to be safe, for us to feel peace again." Scout lay at the foot of the stroller chin, on his paws, eyes closed in the sun. Suddenly, Noah giggled. Mike turned. The baby was staring at Scout, hands waving. And then, just as Scout opened his eyes, Noah reached out. His little fingers brushed Scout's ear. And Scout wagged his tail. Just once. Rachel gasped. "It's the first time he's reached for anything," she said, breathless. Mike was already pulling out his phone to capture the moment. "Claire would be so proud," he said softly. Her son reaching out to the dog she trusted most. Over the next few weeks, something shifted in Noah. The alerts from Scout grew less frequent. His color was stronger, his appetite better. He began babbling at the mobile above his crib and grasping for toys with surprising strength. The doctors were optimistic. The latest blood work showed his metabolic levels within range. The treatment was working. The early detection had made all the difference. Still, Scout remained vigilant. But now he rested a little easier. He slept more at night, played fetch again in the yard, almost like he knew his mission was evolving. It was a Saturday morning in late January when it happened. Mike was reading to Noah in the living room some silly rhyming book with animals in pajamas when Scout sat up suddenly. He walked over, sat down beside the baby, and leaned gently against the rocker. Rachel, watching from the kitchen, smiled. But then Scout did something different. He stood, walked to the wall where Claire's framed photo hung, and sat down in front of it, looking up. Just looking. Rachel walked over slowly, kneeling beside him. "You miss her too, don't you?" she whispered. Scout pressed on his head to the frame, held still, then turned and walked back to the crib, as if saying, "She's still here." That night, Mike added the moment to his journal. Scout acknowledged her photo today, stared for almost a minute. Noah laughed during it, like he felt it too. Maybe Claire visits in her own way. He closed the book and looked over at Rachel. "Do you think he'll always remember her?" Rachel smiled sadly. I think he'll never forget. Spring arrived slowly that year. The snow melted, the sun stayed out longer, and Noah now laughing daily and kicking his legs like he was training for a race turned one. They held a small backyard party, just family neighbors, and the NICU nurses who had become lifelong friends. Noah's cake was shaped like a paw print. Scout got his own cupcake pumpkin peanut butter made from scratch. Before the candles were lit, Mike stood with Noah in his arms and Scout at his side. I used to think this story was about loss, he said, about things we missed, the family we lost, the time we couldn't get back. He looked down at Noah. But now I know it's about what remains. Rachel stepped up beside him, tears shining in her eyes. It's about what we choose to carry forward. And as they all sang happy birthday, Scout barked once right on cue, tail wagging, as if he too was singing along. That night, after everyone had gone and Noah was asleep in his crib, Mike sat outside with Scout on the back steps. The air was still. Crickets chirping, wind soft in the trees. You did it, Mike said. Scout looked up. You kept him safe. You kept us together. You carried her love the whole way. Scout leaned in and rested his head on Mike's knee. I don't know how long we'll have you, Mike whispered, voice thick, but I promise you this, Noah will always know who you are. He pulled a new tag from his pocket and clipped it onto Scout's collar. It read, Guardian, Brother, Legend. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If Scout's story touched your heart the way it touched ours, we hope you'll share it with someone you love. Subscribe to Heroes for Animals to keep supporting real-life changing stories like this one. Now we'd love to hear from you. Has a dog or any animal ever changed your life in a way you'll never forget? Tell us your story in the comments, because sometimes the best stories are the ones we live through, side by side.